On is the new kid on the block in footwear, especially in the running shoe world, as these new brands like On have slowly been chipping away at Nike's stranglehold on the industry by making some of the most innovative, squishiest, softest running shoes on the market. Just look at this thing. It's completely ridiculous. Voids in the heel, columns that run all the way through, like 2 inches of foam. So when I saw that they released a new boot that was $330 that looked pretty wicked, I was intrigued. So we're gonna cut this thing in half, run it through our test to really see, are these actually boots, or is it just a tall shoe that they're calling boots? How do they compare to the other hiking boots and backpacking boots we've done in the series, like Loa, La Sportiva, and Merrell? Are these the squishiest, softest boots on the market, just like their running shoes? And is this just a cash grab by On, or do they actually innovate and change the backpacking industry, and should you consider buying a pair? And by new kid on the block, I mean 2009 retired professional competitive runner, 6-time Ironman champion, and 3-time world duathlon champion, Oliver Bernard, wanted to find a running shoe to achieve the perfect running sensation and create a running shoe with a totally new feel. So he started experimenting with some new concepts, new materials, new setups, and he pulled some solid inspiration from, of all things, a garden hose. Through the cross section, seeing how it squishes and bounces back, almost like a macro version of the microscopic bubbles in every single foam. And so he partnered with an engineer to start making some prototypes and called the new technology Cloud Tec. And since he was a Nike athlete, he presented this new idea to Nike and they completely rejected it. But those prototypes quickly caught the attention of friends and avid runners David Allenman and Casper Copetti, and in 2010 the trio officially established the On brand in Zurich, Switzerland. And with those same prototypes that Nike rejected, just a month later they won the coveted ISPO brand new award. 5 months after that, On shoes were being stocked and highlighted on retail shelves. And since then, On has been on an upward trajectory with the company, slowly eating away at Nike's market share. As of 2019, the company held 40% of the running shoe market in Switzerland and 10% in Germany. In 2020, On products were sold in 6,000 retailers in 55 countries, with the US being its single biggest market, where it accounted for 6.6% of the performance running shoe category in the United States alone. In 2021, the company IPO'd and raised $746 million by taking the company public, and by the end of 2023, their total revenue after becoming public was $1.79 billion. An insane growth trajectory from just 2009, 2010, 14 years later, they're almost a $2 billion company. But being so young, it's hard to know, is this all just hype? Is it just the concepts where people can see visual tech that makes them think it's squishier and higher performance? And does it apply to backpacking boots? That's what we're gonna try to figure out. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is On, which is a very confusing name. It's hard to do videos on because you're on, it's just a very common word and nobody knows what the logo means. Even my parents clearly don't watch my videos because they're like, have you done the QN shoes? I'm like, QN? What are you talking about? So the On name and the logos could use a little help. But the style is the Cloudalpine waterproof. They weigh 1 pound, 5 ounces, and they retail for $330. The most expensive of this backpacking hiking boot series that we're doing by like $100. They're made in Vietnam, and the way that they position this product is engineered with our signature running tech. The Cloudalpine waterproof makes light of technical terrain. A Cloud Tec midsole provides comfort with a unique speed board pushes you further. Injected nylon with 15% carbon energizes each step so you're ready come what may. Go higher and farther with this lightweight boot featuring a mission grip outsole with unique lug patterns. Featuring a ripstop upper and protective mudguard, this lightweight boot keeps distractions at bay. A waterproof membrane shields feet from wind and rain so you can focus and discover new outer spaces along the way. And if you want a pair of these, check them out via links in my description.
Did you know that condensation is your enemy? Like, you got your nice cold drink, you're getting refreshed, you set your drink down on the table and bam, watering, staining your table. It sucks. That's why Rose Anvil is releasing brand new specialty coasters made from super unique boot leathers. So what's so good about a leather coaster? They naturally absorb the moisture without seeping through to the surface below. The soft leather naturally grips the surface, preventing slipping, spills, and scratches. And what's really cool about the leather coasters is they patina over time. Like, I've had this kind of experimental coaster on my desk for about 1.5 years. I've been putting my drinks on it literally every single day. And it started as this color, so you can kind of see how crazy it gets, and it also forms like the shape of the actual cup. Like there's little indentations right here where the cup goes. And it's like formed perfectly to that over time. For the boot enthusiasts, it's like the exact same leather as the boots you're probably wearing right now. So you can match your boots to your coasters. You can kick your feet up right next to your coaster and it'll be the same things like Oro Legacy, Copper Rough and Tough, Hawthorne Mule Skinner, Amber Harness, Brown Distress, Chocolate Shrunken Bison, Tobacco Shrunken Bison, Black Shrunken Bison. Also, the holidays are coming up, so it's like a perfect gift for anybody, like coworkers, maybe giving them a subtle hint to get their act together and stop staining all the dang tables with their 45-ounce Diet Coke. So they all come in packs of 4, so you get 4 coasters with them. Check them out while they're still in stock and match your boots to your coasters. It's sick.
So now start going through the details because this boot has no leather. It's a tragedy. But there is some pretty cool materials on here because there's 3 distinct materials. There's the ripstop, there's this chunky fabric, and there's this black fabric that kind of fills in the gaps. And like most brands on their website, does, once again, the name, I know you're just kind of stuck with On, but it's so confusing. And like most brands, On has no information on their site. The most we could gather is it's something about 10% of this boot is recycled and about 40% of the polyester is recycled. But other than that, there's not much to it. So if you don't know what ripstop is, it's a pretty cool material. It's a bit overhyped in my opinion, but it does seem to work. And the way they do this is they add a heavier thread throughout the weave. Once it starts ripping, it will stop at those thicker threads. They also have these darker green reinforcements that seem to also help prevent the spreading of rips. So there's 2 ways that they prevent it, with the heavier thread and these reinforcements. The benefit of ripstop is it stops rips, it's super light and it's breathable, but it won't be nearly as durable as leather. But also keep in mind at the thickness of like 0.2, 0.3 millimeters, ripstop is gonna be stronger than leather at 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters. So for this application, it makes a lot of sense. But the coolest material is this chunky fabric because it's really, I've only seen something like this on one other boot, and this is the Noglev boot that Huckberry sells. And this is a single piece of Kevlar reinforced upper with these like TPU rubber guards around it. And so it's like a Kevlar boot. And it's got this big chunky material, and the high spots I believe are the actual Kevlar, and the lower spots are just regular, like probably nylon or something, because we burned it. And those Kevlar threads didn't melt and didn't burn, they just were highlighted. And I love this boot. I think it's so cool. It's like a bulletproof boot. It's Kevlar reinforced. And it looks just like this material. And so to see if it was Kevlar, we just did the same test. We burned the material to see if those lighter, chunkier threads didn't burn. And as you can see, it basically performed the exact same. And so I'm pretty sure that this is like a Kevlar reinforced material, which seems so obvious that you would want to like advertise it as that, like Kevlar reinforced, bulletproof. Like this seems so obvious, and yet they don't say anything about it. And it's a cool material too, because it's basically like ripstop on steroids, because it's the same concept. You've got the chunkier material. It's a little bit more abrasion resistant and more rip resistant. But with Kevlar, it's just way cooler and way chunkier. And that chunkiness actually helps protect the material because those heavier Kevlar threads loop up higher. So anytime you're getting some wear on this, you're not even wearing through anything other than that Kevlar. It's so cool. And they didn't even mention it. It's not even on their website anywhere. And I don't know for sure if it is Kevlar, but the only thing that I could really even point to that gives us some idea of what this might be is they say it's 90% polyamide. And polyamide fabric is a type of synthetic textile that's made from a string of polyamide monomers, but it's also commonly known as nylon. So I don't know. I think the ripstop's probably nylon, and probably the non-Kevlar threads are nylon, because this third material, which is right here, this black material that kind of fills in all the gaps, it's just a typical material. There's really nothing exciting or game-changing about it. And so that might be nylon too. So once again, I have no idea what's going on with the boot, and that's why I like doing this, is because brands don't tell you what you're buying. And this is a $330 boot, and you have no idea what's on the inside, how it's structured, and even what materials they're using other than ripstop. But the puncture test, it only took 51 pounds to puncture through. So even though it is super abrasion resistant, it's supposed to be Kevlar is allegedly bulletproof. Bulletproof vests have tons and tons of layers to stop that bullet, whereas this is just one layer. So that's probably why it performs so poorly on the puncture test, even though it's Kevlar and it's really abrasion resistant. Another thing I think is pretty cool and innovative, and also I just love the fact anytime a boot or a product gives you instructions just on the product, like they do in the vintage military boots, like the jungle boot and the bunny boot, I love it. And so it just says right here, like slide to unlock. And this does work pretty well. It's kind of a pain, but it does lock in your laces. And I just like the ability to have like a new concept for laces and keeping laces tight, because it does work. It's just a little bit of a pain. But what about the inside of this boot? It's basically a typical boot line, and there's not a lot of special aspects to it. You know, there's not a heel counter cover. It's just like, it almost feels like legging material, and then the upper is more of like a jersey material. But the coolest thing that I didn't even notice till we started wearing these, because I wore them, Melvin wore them, Jay wore them, we all unanimously love this little spot right here. Because instead of that going to a true like 6 or 8 inch height, the back of the heel drops down, but it's not completely open because they put a little bit of elastic in there with the pull tab. So it's easier to put on because you got that pull tab to kind of pull it apart. But also when you're walking, more importantly, when you're actually hiking in these, you don't have that pressure point pushing against the back of your Achilles. It's super comfy. And I've seen other boots do this, but it just works really, really well with this boot. And they say it's waterproof and it has a waterproof lining, so we did the waterproof test, passed with flying colors. And unlike the Merrells and the Ultras, this actually has a lining, a waterproof bootie, and an outer layer. Because if you remember, the Merrells were just, the Gore-Tex lining was your lining. And it was just a little teeny filaments, a little bit of a layer of something on top. So once you wore through that, you basically wore through your boot. Whereas this is more traditional. It's a better way of doing it, where you have the lining to wear through, then the waterproof lining you have to wear through to lose the waterproofness of the boot. And if you look at the insole, pretty basic insole. You know, it's just it's an open cell foam and a closed cell foam, and it does have these little wings on it. But it's pretty basic. It's nothing crazy or special. Like, remember the Noglevs had like coconut fiber and veg tan leather, pretty cool. But the midsole is really where I'm curious about this boot, because like I mentioned, like On has made their name off doing crazy, squishy, and ridiculous midsoles. And so there is some of that Cloud Tec in here, because you can kind of see there's these little gaps here that run all the way through. They're only maybe a centimeter, 1/4 inch of a gap. It does clearly still work though. You can see how it squishes, and you can almost feel it when you're wearing them, just that little bit of squish. And it seems like it is a true, maybe not dual density, but 2 different layers of foam, because we did the durometer test on them, and they both scored around 40. So I don't know if it's a dual density or if it's just 2 different layers of foam, because you can see the thing that separates them is that speed board. And that speed board is in all the various On shoes that I've worn, and most of them that I've seen. A few of them don't have this speed board. I just love the fact that Ons have that speed board that's really popular in backpacking boots, as we've seen from all the other boots. And so it lined up perfectly for On to make a really killer backpacking boot, because they already do backpacking concepts in their running shoes. But we've seen with the Salomon running shoes that these can be fragile and they can crack. So let's just do a little crack test, see if I can break it. Nope. It's a lot better than the running shoes. And obviously this is not a running shoe, and so it needs to be more durable, but that's not cracking. Let's see if this Cloud Monster cracks. Nope. And so that's why I think that extra carbon that they put in this that didn't seem to be in the Salomons makes all the difference. Because you remember, I just cracked that Salomon in half. And this, you can bend it to touching and it won't crack. And if you don't know what that speed board is for, in running, it's actually the same purpose in both of these, you know, because in running, as you hit the ground, you're loading that shoe up. And without this speed board, you're just using your own body to propel you forward. But with this rigid board, you're almost loading a spring with each step. And as you lift off, some of that energy is returned into your step, allowing you to propel yourself more forward. And they use that same concept in backpacking boots, because you have a heavy pack on, you're walking up super steep stuff, and with every step, you're wearing out your calf and you're wearing out your muscles. And by adding a little springboard in there, same concept. Every step you take, it springs you just a little bit more forward. So it works really well. And that's why I was like, oh dang, On could make a pretty killer backpacking boot if they do it right. But we'll really see when we get it cut in half how it's all structured, because I'm not convinced that it is 2 layers of foam. And it doesn't even look like there's very much foam in these. And then really the last thing to look at is the outsole, which it's a solid outsole all the way across. You don't have the windows that we saw in the more foam-based hiking boots that made them more flexible and more squishy. These are backpacking boots, so it's a solid layer all the way across. It seems like it's fairly thick. The lugs do seem a little shallow compared to some of the other backpacking boots. And this outsole came in at a 65 Shore, so pretty hard. It's gonna be pretty durable. We did the bar drop test. It bounced up 6 inches, which is pretty average. And we did the puncture test, and it took 163 pounds of puncture through. It's in the top third of all tests, and it's more than likely caused by that carbon reinforced speed plate there, or speed board. So now let's cut these things in half and see if they are actually up to On's quality, their innovation, or is this just like another like synthetic boot that On just put their name on and charged $330 for without any substance delivered. got them cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider doing it. If you are subscribed, just push that little like button. Those free clicks mean more than you could imagine for us because we have to buy these brand new at full price just to cut them in half to show you what you're actually buying. So let's see what's inside. There's a lot less foam in here than I expected because just looking at the Cloud Monsters and how they felt underfoot, I expected to see a lot more of this, a lot more voids, a lot more foam. And this might have the least amount of foam. Maybe the La Sportivas have slightly less foam, but the other boots have way more foam and less speedboard and less rigidity. And yet me, Jay, and Melvin all wore these, and we all agreed that if it's near the top, if not the top, most comfortable in this entire series. And so how did they pull that off? Like with such little foam and so much rigidity, how did they make them feel so comfortable? Well, I think the voids in the heel do actually help. Even though they're really small, you do feel a little bit of that squish. But more importantly, I think that On has just done a really good job of developing its own foam over the last decade or so to really put themselves on the map. They couldn't just rely on any kind of foam. They had to develop something that would really put them above or set them aside from Nike so people had a reason to buy Ons. And so applying that same foam into a hiking boot, it seems like you can get away with a lot less foam with the higher quality foam and still get a lot of squish and a lot of comfort. And with the Speedboard, it actually goes the full length of the boot. And so you get that rigidity, you get that springy and super supportive feel of that full length carbon infused Speedboard. So now that it's cut in half, can I break the Speedboard? Nope. Oh my gosh, it's so rigid that way too. Oh God, I can't even bend it the other way. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't even break it that way. And the coolest thing, and maybe my favorite thing about this, is how they've done the Speedboard. Because I like Ons, but to me, even though you have all this squish from the Speedboard down and you could feel it squishing under your foot, they're really hard underfoot because you don't have as much material separating you from the Speedboard. Because this carbon infused plate is not going to shape to the shape of your foot like leather would. And so that's the one thing I didn't love about all the Ons that I've had, but this fixes it. Because not only do you have the insole and that lasting material, but you got that 5 to 6 millimeter layer of orange foam, then the Speedboard, then additional foam to give you that squish underfoot, and then the outsole. And I think that's why they're so comfortable. And I think that's why, part of why they cost $330, but it clearly works. So are they worth that $330 compared to all the other boots? I don't think it's $100 better, but I think it is better. I think it's a really good boot and it's done well. It balances all the things that we've talked about, and it's the new kids on the block. They've only been around for like 15 years and they're already outperforming some of the bigger, more well-known backpacking brands. So then are these the softest, squishiest boots on the market, similar to what they've done with their running shoes? No, they're not. They're actually some of the more stiff and firm boots of the series, but they do have all that squish underfoot. And so I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's bad that On, known for making really squishy shoes, makes a really firm and rigid hiking boot because of all that stuff we talked about, gives it the comfort to balance it out. So you get the stiffness and firmness balanced out by that comfort and squishiness of that On foam. So then is this a cash grab? I don't think it is. It is pretty pricey, but it seems like it's well-intentioned and the materials mostly line up to the price. And especially for being a newer and smaller brand, I think it's fine. I don't think it's a great deal. I don't think it's a terrible deal. I think it's fine. But how do these compare to the other boots that we're reviewing in this backpacking boot series, like Loa, La Sportiva, and Merrell? Well, for the objective, semi-objective ranking, where we're just looking at materials regardless of price, looking at performance regardless of price, just looking at the boots for what they are, how would I rank these? Well, even though they have zero leather in them, I still would put them at the very top of the ranking board so far. So I'd go On, Loa, Salomon, and then La Sportiva. But what about my personal ranking that adds in the price of the boots and all the subjective stuff of what I personally like aesthetically, what I like in a boot, how it feels, and all the subjective stuff? I would still keep Salomon at the top. Then I would go On, because I love the look of these. I think they look pretty killer. They feel really good. I like the performance, and I think they're a better boot than the Salomons. I just love the look of the Salomons. Then I would put La Sportiva and then Loa last. Even though Loas are killer boots, I just like that concept of the La Sportiva. So I think I even swapped that from the last video because I like that concept. So if you haven't seen those videos, go check them out. They're really good to start rounding out your information with this series. We got a couple more boots in this series, so support this, give it a like, give it a subscribe. Check out our handmade leather goods we make right here in the shop, especially since there's no leather in this boot. And check out our collaborations, and thank you guys for all that you do in supporting this. It's the only way we can afford to buy $330 boots just to cut in half to show you what you're actually buying. So thank you guys, see ya. They are pretty rigid. Yeah!